And certainly, we're thankful that you're joining us today here on WRTW 90.5 The Key. We're excited to have with us for this next segment Mr. Hal Slager, running for state representative in District 15, and Mrs. Julie Olthoff, running for state representative in District 19. Now, Hal, District 15, that is Sherrville and Griffith and Dyer, correct?
Yes, and parts of St. John.
Okay.
All of Griffith, parts of Griffith and St. John, and all of Dyer and Sherrville.
So if you're listening from the western side of Lake County, listen up, because Hal's going to be talking to you today. And then also joining us here in the studio is Julie Olthoff, and she's from District 19, and that's Crown Point, parts of Maryville, Hebron. What am I missing?
Winfield, all of Winfield, and most of Hobart.
Oh, Hobart. That's the one I was thinking of. That's what I was. So we're glad to have these two. We're going to give you an opportunity as our listeners to get to know them a little bit. So first of all, I want you each to introduce yourself. Hal, why don't you go first? Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and how you decided to get into politics and run for state representative.
Yes, thanks. This is actually I like to say my fourth career. I started as a CPA. Took over the family business in graphic arts, then evolved into real estate, where I own and manage some commercial property, and then I've gotten into this political part-time job. I started as a councilman in the town of Sherrville, and after 10 years of that, the districts got ungerrymandered. The District 15 used to stretch 90 miles from Brookston, Indiana, up to Sherrville, just to carve up some Republican areas. Now it's functionally the Lake Central School Corporation district, and that was a district that I could see representing. So I ran for that, and I served for 6 years in that capacity.
Fantastic. And how about you, Julie? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'll pick up when I started a business in Maryville. I own a company called Via Marketing, and we're going to celebrate our 34th year coming up. It's hard to believe it's been so many years.
You must have started that when you were 10 years old, right?
Absolutely. You are right. I was chairman of the Maryville Chamber for a time, and the town of Maryville was looking for a business owner to sit on the Plan Commission and BZA, and I was the appointed person for that because they were looking for a woman and a business owner who lived in Maryville. A little bit of window dressing, but I stepped right into it. And then I was asked if I ever thought about running for state representative. And, of course, I said no, things like that. But then I said yes and won and served for 2 terms. That would be 4 years.
So you were a state representative for 4 years, and now you're running again. And so explain to us some of your priorities. Tell us some of the things you got accomplished when you were in Indianapolis for those 4 years and what your priorities are this time around.
Well, I don't want to take all of Hal's time saying all that I've accomplished, but the 2... I guess bills that I'm most proud of would be the suicide prevention legislation that was really sweeping across so many schools and veterans, and we put in so many resources. It was a result of a study committee and a lot of people weighing in. I received an award from the School Counselors Association for that work. It was really a great thing because the suicide rate is so high among certain populations.
Right.
And to just have a note about that, I want to work on that some more when I go back, because with COVID, mental health issues have slipped back to where they were before a lot of this came into being. I also worked with Township Trustee Mervan on the No More Secrets bill, bringing sexual assault prevention education into schools. So of all the people that Senator Mervan, Democrat, could have chosen up here from the region, he chose the Republican representative to carry the bill, and we got it through, it passed, and that, to me, education is the only way we're going to get out of seeing headlines every day with sexual assaults, rapes, domestic violence. It's got to stop.
So you've done some work that has really made an impact on the families through the school system and through the suicide prevention. I appreciate that very, very much. Hal, how about you? Tell us some of the priorities you have, some of the things that you've worked on, and what your plan is to get back to Indianapolis.
Yeah, that could all take more than an hour, but I'll try to condense.
We don't have that much time.
My number one priority, and truly the reason I'm trying to get back, is to take care of some unfinished business, what I have in dealing with pediatric care. Most people don't realize it, but half our children are Medicaid patients, and crossing state lines into Illinois is a real problem with reimbursement from Indiana Medicaid. It's not just Indiana Medicaid, it's crossing state lines. If it was the other way around, it'd be a problem. So we're trying to come up with a solution to allow closer access for these children to go 25 miles to the Chicago hospital as opposed to 150 miles to Indianapolis hospitals. And when children are sick, they're really sick.
Right.
And so that's an absolute top priority for us. It's such a quality of life issue, and would be an economic development issue, because if those hospitals in Chicago knew they get decent reimbursement, they would invest more in providing local care right here as well. We also watched how the Gary School Corporation was into the state for $110 million in bailouts before the state finally took over that corporation. I don't want to see that happen again on any kind of municipal level, and so I'd like to put some plans in place on how we would deal with any other kind of government entity other than schools that would become insolvent and come hand in hand to the people of Indiana. I think it's fair to get that clear up front, and we have to do that because a municipality cannot file bankruptcy in the state of Indiana. So those are two of the big ones. We could go on. A couple of things I'd like to talk about as it relates to your ministry. I authored the bill that would allow a mother who conceived in rape to terminate parental rights for the rapist. This was not allowed in Indiana. It is now. Wow. And it was such a problem for those mothers who were trying to conceal their child to make sure that the rapist would not attempt to exert parental rights. The other thing we did was we passed a bill that I authored that had to do with the disposition of miscarried remains. And this was so important because people didn't realize you could do something other than treat that as bio-waste. And instead, in the bill, we don't talk about the fetus, we talk about the child. And so that was a big one.
Well, we certainly appreciate that, and especially for both of you, your work with helping families on such a personal level as whether suicide or in a miscarriage, and you know, you brought up the subject of children who are conceived in rape, and we are definitely pro-life here in our ministry and on WRTW, and the thought of the father or the person who should be in prison being able to exert parental rights on a child that they conceived illegally is just unthinkable to me, and your work in that respect is great. It's interesting also how you have a different because Cherville and Dyer specifically in St. John there are right on the border with Illinois. Your desire to provide healthcare options for children across state lines for people who literally live on the state line. That's a unique challenge that I would not have really considered. And having children myself, knowing that option would be available to me, that's peace of mind for a lot of families. We hear a lot about healthcare in the news right now and on the national level, but it really hits home when you talk about a family who lives in Dyer, whose child needs an emergency medical procedure, and they have to go to Lafayette when they've got a perfectly good hospital 25 miles away on the other side of the border. So,
right. This issue was brought to me, I have to say, the issue was brought to me by Donna Kreiner with the Northwest Indiana Cancer Kids Foundation. Of course, there's lots of other ailments children have other than cancer, but that's certainly a big one that requires ongoing care while they're battling that disease.
Definitely. Now, one of the things that both of you hit on, and I'll ask Julie this question first, you both talked about bills that you authored and sponsored that were heard in committee and have since been passed into law. So tell me about some of the laws that you have personally helped create and craft here for the state of Indiana.
Beyond the two I just spoke of, I helped carry 53 bills through while I was there for my 4 years, so that's quite a bit.
And keep in mind that's a 10-week session and a 16-week session, right, Julie?
That's right. That's right.
So it's not like you're there for 12 months. You're there for 10 weeks 1 year, 16 weeks the next year.
Right.
And in that time, in two 10-week sessions and two 16-week sessions, in addition to writing and passing budgets, which is one of the main things you do, you also helped put 53 bills.
I did, and let me explain.
Incredible.
Yeah, let me explain that a little bit. I authored myself 6 over the time, and then, like Hal and I worked on private property rights bill together. So then you co-author with people where Hal was the lead, and I co-authored. And then there's something called sponsoring. So when a senator passes a bill on the Senate side, they look for a House of Representative person to shepherd it through on the House side. You know, the bills have to pass the Senate, and then they pass the House, and then they go on to the governor for signing. So of the 53, 6 I authored myself, and then I don't remember the number of the ones the senators came to me and asked if I would carry them through. And then so I co-sponsored and co-authored many of the others.
So you're pretty busy when you're there.
Well,
It's not a
yeah.
vacation for you.
No, I don't know. Type A, so here we are. Here we are. But I could talk about the daycare protection bill that Maryville came to me with. And again, it's another family bill. I think that's my wheelhouse. That's where I served, and a lot of the bills came from. So remember a few years ago, Maryville found a daycare with guns, knives, and open alcohol. It was a big deal. The lady who owned it got arrested. But Maryville was upset because they didn't even know it was there. The daycare should have had a business license. So we kind of restructured how daycares get their license by making them prove that they have local authority to be where they are. Also, the code enforcement officer would go visit them. So there's a lot, like one more stop check to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do.
Checks and balances
That's
to protect
right.
our kids. That's fantastic.
That's right.
That's great. Now, you said that you and Hal worked together on a private property bill. Hal, can you talk about that?
Well, actually, I'd really like to talk about a couple of the big things that I know.
Yeah, for sure.
You got better ones.
For sure.
I hate to derail you there, but
No.
Of course, the I kind of like big issues, and I started out my first year with the bill to get Griffith out of Calumet Township, which is finally happening this year. But
Yes.
that was a major piece of legislation that basically gave authority to a unit of government to shop for better services. The other big ones, of course, would be the train, the South Shore Line improvement on the main line, and then the Westlake coming south. What was interesting about the improvement on the main line, it affects 4 different counties, and I'll never forget speaking with Bill Hanna with the RDA, saying they had agreements between the 4 counties for a sharing of costs. And we're in session, and I said, please get me that paperwork. And he says, paperwork? There's no paperwork. And I said, then you've got no agreement. And so part of the bill was about structuring this to legislate everyone's participation and requirement, and we did that not by force but by agreement. We've got 4 different counties on board with that bill, and then they turned around and instructed their representatives how they wanted to vote. It was really a fun bill to work on.
The South Shore expansion would be fantastic for Northwest Indiana.
Yes, and then of course right there in Hammond, You're probably aware of the new biosciences building at Purdue Northwest. It's a $40 million structure, and I spent 5 years working to try to get that money secured, which finally happened in the budget bill. That's going to transform that campus. It has transformed that campus. It's truly a full-time, four-year college now.
That's fantastic. Well, I have a few questions. We got about 10 minutes or so left in our time together, so I've just got a few questions that I wrote down that I felt like maybe our listeners would like to hear. And you guys almost both of you have answered the first question for me already. But the Republican Party, of course, as we know, holds a supermajority in the State House in Indianapolis. But here in Lake County, and even in surrounding counties, and how you working across the border in some cases, it's important to work across the aisle to connect with and work with constituents who may not be Republicans. So how would you best, and we'll let you answer this first, how would you best work across the aisle to unite the residents in Lake County to pass legislation and to work in the best interests of all Hoosiers?
Yes, I always say that there's a time for politics and there's a time for governing. And once the politics is over, it's time to govern. And I've had great success with that. I think most people expect that of their representatives at any level. And the way that I like to do it, I just kind of alluded to it regarding the train bill, is working with the stakeholders, the people that are really affected by whatever the problem or solution may be, and making sure that we haven't created a bigger problem by solving another one. And when we do that, then usually the other legislators are happy to join hands and vote for that. We saw that with the train bill. The other legislators fought me when their constituents were not satisfied, and then they all voted for it when we got there. I've also reached out across the aisle. In particular, I happen to mention that the bill that had to do with termination of parental rights for rapists. There happened to be a female legislator on the other side of the aisle who was really active in that arena, and so obviously I had to get her on board, and she did a tremendous job helping advance that bill. So those are the kinds of things we look to do.
That's fantastic. And Julie, you spoke already about partnering with Senator Mervan, and of course in Maryville, and even portions of Crown Point. There's a lot of bipartisan work that has to be done. So
Right. Well, you really need to listen. So if somebody calls your office, you don't, check and see what their voting record is. You listen to what the problem is and see how you could route them for a solution. Because a lot of times people have concerns, but there's already laws that handle that. But a lot of times there isn't. Sometimes it's just routing them to a state agency that can help, and sometimes it is. We need to fix this and write a bill that handles it.
I love what you said about listening. Because even in my line of work in education and in ministry, a lot of times people just want and need somebody to listen to them and to hear them out.
Right.
So
right.
That's fantastic. Let me move on to my next question before we run out of time here. One of the many concerns, one of the primary concerns of many conservative and Christian voters in Northwest Indiana is in regards to the sanctity of life. And I personally have been doing some studying on the abortion issue just in our state alone. And the most recent statistics go through 2018. And in 2018, there were 8,037 abortions in the state of Indiana, ranging in age from 10 years old on up. And so how will you, and I know you have, Julie, have received endorsement from Right to Life, and Hal, I know you're very active with Right to Life as well. How will you work to defend life from the womb to the tomb as a state representative in Indianapolis? Julie, you go first.
All right. Well, my track record speaks for itself, where I've always voted for everything pro-life. And you have to remember, once we pass the law, then it gets tested and goes to judicial, which is why judges are so important on who they are and who we elect or appoint for those judges' positions. And then I usually tell audiences like this, it's a heart issue as well. It's the church reaching out to people, because you could legislate something, but that doesn't mean it's going to stop abortions 100%. It comes back to decisions, life choices, and that's where the church can really minister and reach out to people. So I take my hat off to those who volunteer in rape crisis centers, in Mommy's Haven, who has the home for children, and the Women's Center that does ultrasounds before decisions are made.
Fantastic. How about you, Hal?
We have to promote the value of human life. I've heard it said that we live in a killing society, and it starts with abortion, treating human life like it's disposable. I have always voted for life. I think it's fundamental, and I will always vote for life.
That's relief. That's great to hear you say that. Even in Indiana, which I think would be considered one of the more conservative states in the United States, since 2016, the number of abortions performed in the state of Indiana has continually gone up. It's continually risen, and we only have 8 or 10 abortion clinics in our whole state. It's not like we have 100 of them, and we've still seen that, I call it, murder rate continue to rise, and with obviously, I think we all are aware that it's not going to be long before the United States Supreme murder rate continue to rise, and with obviously, I think we all are aware that it's not going to be long before the United States Supreme Court hears a case regarding abortion rights and Roe versus Wade, and whether or not that gets overturned, I don't know. But my opinion is it's really going to fall onto the states, and electing representatives and state senators that are 100% pro-life it's going to come down to the individual states making decisions for themselves, which really is probably where it should be anyway. But it is encouraging to me, as it is, I'm sure, to our listeners, to know that both of you, if sent back to Indianapolis, are going to vote with a pro-life record, and your track record proves that, and we certainly are grateful and thankful for that. Any other things either one of you would like to add about that, the sanctity of life issue?
No.
Okay, I'm going to go on.
I like that simply. Nope.
Okay, well, I mean, it's cut and dry.
It is.
You can't be pro-life and pro-abortion. It's one or the other. It's either pro-life or pro-death. Right. And you hear a lot of arguments about certain instances and times when abortion is okay and when it's not. And I think that as Christians, we all have to come to the foundational belief that all life is given by God. And regardless of how that life is conceived or under what circumstances that life is conceived, God gives life, and it's God's job to take it away. It's not man's job to fix God's mistake, and a life is not a mistake. A life is given by God, and it's our job to protect that and to speak up for the unborn and those who can't speak for themselves.
Right, and if I could just interject, and to take care of the mother.
Yeah.
With compassion and love.
And there's a lot of circumstances that mothers are going through, whether it's a 10-year-old girl. I read a story just yesterday where a 10-year-old girl was impregnated by her 11 or 12-year-old brother. And they had the baby, and the baby was okay, and the mother was okay, but it takes a lot of support, and it's a huge support staff that's required. And I love what you said, Julie, about the responsibility of churches. And I was having a conversation with my neighbor, and I'm getting just slightly off track, but if churches in America fulfilled their role of taking care of the poor, then the government wouldn't have to.
Yep.
If the churches in America performed their role of taking care of the widows and the fatherless and the motherless and those that are struggling with a variety of different things, then the necessity for the government to step in with welfare systems and that kind of stuff wouldn't be there if the churches would do their job. And I'm so thankful that both of you bring that perspective of the responsibility of the church, and the role that God plays in all of this is supreme, of course. So I'm gonna shift to our last question here, because this one touches home with a lot of people who are new residents of the state of Indiana. We've seen the population of Indiana steadily grow in recent years, with residents fleeing neighboring states to escape high taxes, high crime, and heavily regulated business practices. What would you say to brand new Indiana residents who are seeking a fresh start as a Hoosier. Hal, we'll start with you, since your district does border a state line, and St. John especially has seen an incredible surge of residents coming from Illinois. What would you say to those people who are trying to seek a fresh start and a new beginning here in Northwest Indiana?
Yes, indeed, St. John and Dyer. It is almost humorous to me how I'll see new Hoosiers coming from Illinois, and they'll move just across the border. And sometimes they will, on occasion, say something like, "Why can't we have this, or why can't we have that, the Park District or whatever, like we have in Chicago?" And I'll always say, well, we can do that. We'll raise your taxes up to what they were in Chicago, and then we can do that. And that usually hits home. But by and large, the folks that I've met, and we've knocked on a lot of doors this year, made a lot of phone calls. We're somewhere in the neighborhood of 10, 12,000 calls and doors. And the people that are coming from Illinois usually admit to escaping from Illinois, and they're very happy to be here and very happy to look at life differently than the way they did there.
That's fantastic, and it's great that Indiana can be a haven for that. So, Julie, can you speak to that subject?
Sure. I say welcome.
Absolutely.
Come on over. Experience the beautiful land that we have here in Indiana. But think about your voting practices. If you are for fiscal responsibility, stay with it. Right. If not, maybe think about the differences. Indiana's budget is really a beautiful thing. It was restored from the hole we were in years ago, and we want to keep it that way.
Absolutely.
And if I have a couple minutes, I'll just put in a plug for that reserve that we have. So the budget sets aside some money so that we can retain a 4-star credit rating, so all the municipalities can borrow at a good rate, and the state. And then it's a rainy day fund. So in case something like an emergency, say COVID-19 happens,
right.
We have some reserve there that can carry us through a few months. It doesn't even carry us on forever, but just a few months. So as a result, Indiana is in so much better shape than our neighboring states. So we don't want to call it a surplus, because many candidates just want to spend the surplus one time and then it's gone. But we want to keep our reserve and the little bit of cushion that we have. It's smart practice.
I think even as a dad and a husband who tries to maintain my own budget on a ministry salary, keeping that reserve there to get us through the past 6 or 8 months has been so important. And when you think of that on the state level, how important it has been for our state, where Indiana is not hurting right now per se, needing federal funds to stay afloat, and that is because of conservative fiscal responsibility that we've enjoyed here in our state for many, many years. And certainly those of you who have come to Indiana from other states, we welcome you and we thank you, and we're glad to have you, but remember what you left, and let's not turn Indiana into that, and remember that when you get to the polls. And of course, we want to encourage everybody to vote. If you haven't voted already, I think I read this morning that 15,400 some Lake County residents have early voted already, and if you haven't early voted, you can get out and you can look at the Lake County Election Board website and get information about where you can do that in this area. If you're voting absentee, don't wait until the last minute to send in your absentee ballot. Get that thing filled out, get it sent in. Your voice is your vote, and we want your vote to count. So the last thing we'll just ask you here before we get ready to sign off, both of you are working on campaigns. You're working towards Election Day. You're looking forward to November 4th so you can take a nap. And but if somebody wants to get involved with helping you and helping your campaign, what's the best way for them to do that at this point? Julie, why don't you go first?
I have a website, and it is votersforjulie.com. I think if you Google my name, you could find it pretty easily. Please reach out to me if you have a question or want our help.
Absolutely. And Hal, I think you have a canvassing event coming up next week, right? Is it next week in Griffith?
We're canvassing all the time, but yes, we've got a group of people, I think, from Hiles Anderson and some others from the church who are interested in helping, and Griffith is the spot where we're going to ask for that help.
Great. And if anybody else wanted to help, how would they get involved?
Yeah, best way is the website, voteslager.com, V-O-T-E, Slager, S-L-A-G-E-R.com. Website that has a button there where you can volunteer. And by the way, I got to put in a plug for Julie. Her firm built the website.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Fantastic. Well, let me just say how much I appreciate both of you taking the time out of a very busy time of year for you to come in and to be part of this program this morning. I think we informed our listeners about who you are, and any listeners who have any questions, please feel free to reach out to these candidates and let them know what you need and what your questions are, what your concerns are. And I want to thank all of our listeners for tuning in this morning to Grace to Grow Live. This is Anthony Collins, and we've been broadcasting from the downtown studios of WRTW 90.5 FM and simulcasting in Paxton, Illinois on WRTK. And we're certainly thankful for you, our listeners, being with us this morning. Thank you for joining us today. Remember what we said earlier, smiles are free, so give them away. Happy Tuesday, happy fall. God bless you. Have a wonderful day.